like poignant moments in
Yeah.
I think the show's history, and it's definitely one of the most memorable storylines. And the chapter in your book really dives into it, and it was very interesting. And it was a thrill to read the kind of behind the scenes of how the episode got created.
Well, and as you know from the book, and I get chills, on the music side, when with the rooftop song, just at the very end, because, there aren't a lot of words, in terms of dialogue that you can say after something like that, and just allowing the music to play,
Totally.
It's a very
that's where I get my
impactful,
chills.
final scene to that kind of storyline. And there's such a good build up to. I could talk about time standstills forever.
I know.
Well, and we can talk about it in today's context, because it's about bullying, and so much is about bullying these days. Whether it's Harvey Weinstein, whether it's Donald Trump, and of course the shooting itself. The Parkland survivors, to me, are the heroes. The Generation Z, the young people who've been born in the shadow of 9/11, they're going to save the world, I think. We seem to, when I say we, I'm not including you in that. My generation, growing up in the 60s, where we thought we were going to save the world, and we didn't. The world's in a kind of a mess now. But if anybody's going to save it, I think it's
agree.
that Parkland generation.
It's kind of incredible to watch.
And yeah, but it's so much of it comes back to bullying. Whether it's in so many of these stories, like the most recent shooting, where the guy, it sounds like he was on the football team, but he was bullied, and then the very recent one where his advances were spurned, and anyway, whether he was bullied or not, that the atmosphere is there. Of course, the most chilling thing was listening to some of those kids in Texas who were just talking about they were expecting stuff to happen, just because it happens so often now. There's so many shootings. They just sort of said, well, one day it will happen to us. That's really chilling. I'd like to think there's more hope than that we can move away from that we're starting to address the atmosphere of the bully, the bullied, and the bystander, as I talk about in the Time Stand Still chapter. But it's well, anyway, all this
Well, a lot of
it's
the
all relevant
storylines in
today.
Degrassi are kind of timeless. And you guys really were very groundbreaking in some areas, like with trans issues, and there was always a lot of diversity in Degrassi. Was that something that you guys kind of made a conscious effort, or were you just like, no, this is how the world is. We need to be inclusive and tell stories that people aren't necessarily telling right now?
It's very much, and Linda was a driver in this. The mantra was, if it's happening in the schools, if they're talking about it in the corridors, even though, they may not be talking about it at home, or it may be whispered, we need to be talking about it on the show. And of course, Toronto is a very diverse place. So it's natural when we shoot here to have a very inclusive cast.
Kind of to get out a little bit of the heavy stuff, we were wondering, I think you had a question about cast members having a huge impact on either the storylines.
Yeah, so you talk about auditions a lot and how sometimes you guys would tweak things if you really liked someone. I was wondering if there were any actors in particular who you ended up basing some character traits off of, just based off of knowing them a little bit better, or also if any of the cast members maybe gave suggestions for storylines based on their high school experiences.
Well, and this sort of comes at it from maybe a different way, but the one that's most amazing to me is Adamo, Marco Del Rossi. When we cast Adamo, we sense, one of the things we really look for is the ability to be vulnerable. And it's hard because you're in an audition for, maybe 3 minutes. And, you've got lines that you've been rehearsing all night. You're nervous. But if if you can get there and it's a combination of fearlessness and vulnerability, if that's possible. There's just something, and maybe not even using the right words, that you can see, hey, there's something authentic that's coming through. I guess that's what I mean by, being able to be vulnerable in the moment. And then usually the director who's there at the audition will then ask for a different kind of take, not because the first take wasn't good or whatever, just to see how an actor reacts to suggestions. Can they incorporate it? Do they, or do they fight it? With Adamo, he came across really well, and we were thinking of this character that, was going to be gay and gay bashed. We had no concept that Adamo, and I'm not even sure Adamo had a concept that he was gay. And the storyline, as you know, because you've gone through the arc over right. I think 3 seasons. Adamo first comes out to Ellie, and because they think they're boyfriend girlfriend, and then it's just not happening on that level, and so he comes out first to Ellie, then eventually he comes out to his mother. And then finally he comes out to his father, and he comes out to his mother in the kitchen. And then it's at least several episodes later, if not weeks or months later, that he comes out to his father. And his father initially is not really down with this. But in real life, that is exactly what happened to Adamo. He came out to his friends first, and he actually did come out to his mother in the kitchen of his home. This was, life imitating art. And he did not come out to his father for about 6 months after that. Now, when he did come out to his father was very supportive. Really nice guy, his father was. But, it was amazing how, I guess in some ways, the writers, the director who was in at the audition may have sensed that Adamo was gay. Certainly, I will say that as we got on, he didn't admit to us that we knew he was gay after a couple of years. We knew. So when he actually came out to us, it was like, well, what took you so long, dude? And of course, we were incredibly supportive. But that's really, really an example of where the two became very close. And what the writers do is they play on an actor's strengths, and they just write more in that direction. Same is true with Miriam in the early days. I mean, Miriam and Emma really are in many ways sort of one and the same, and that's partly because the writers sense what works, the comedic timing, the vulnerability, the brightness, and just start writing towards the actor.
Speaking of Miriam, you recently had a conversation with her for the Degrassi YouTube channel, and you had mentioned that one of the biggest regrets of your life was actually the Emma Spinner marriage storyline.
Yeah,
is that not one of the biggest regrets of your life?
I know that Emma and Sean really end up together
forever
in our brains.
I think we've written several fan fictions in our head about how Sean comes back from the war and sweeps Emma off of her feet and takes her away from Spinner or something.
Now, here's the one thing, and I may have hinted to it. It was maybe in another interview, or maybe it was when I was talking with Miriam, that if you think about it, and this is something which is a good way of approaching life. When you see two people who are together and you say, "Oh man, that's never going to work out," or you sort of think, "Why is she with that person, or why is he with that person?" It really, what goes on between two people in a relationship is between them. And we can't really know what's going on. We can't know the interplay of weaknesses and strengths and where the secret supports are. So is it possible, if we ever do a reunion kind of episode, or maybe a long form or something like that, which I'd love to do, this is one of the stories that you do. And the obvious one is exactly the one that you talk about, Afghanistan, and he looks really cool. He comes in on his motorcycle, and
His
it's sort of game
motorcycle
over.
tracker.
But yes, yeah, that's right. Is it possible, though, if we think of real life, let's lose the Degrassi fantasy a little bit, that Emma and Spinner, they have their problems, but as in real life, they sort of work it out. And they start to realize over the years that, yeah, maybe it was crazy what they did, but they actually do work together.
I mean, they're still together in the reunion episode, so
yeah.
clearly they're making it work.
I want to follow that, and I don't know how it would end up. But it may not end. For years, I thought exactly like you. Oh, yeah, it would end up with, Sean coming back and Sean and Emma forever. But maybe that's not meant to be. Maybe really, Emma and Spinner can make it happen. Have a kid and, yeah.
It's also fun to kind of end on a place where you wouldn't expect, with like a Las Vegas wedding that actually turns into true love.
Yeah. Having said that, I would have done it differently at the time, but we'll have to see what happens in the future.
Speaking of another controversial coupling, how did you feel about Kevin Smith coming in and breaking up the Joey and Caitlin relationship?
Well, first of all, I love Kevin. I mean, you see, I don't think of Kevin as having broken up the relationship. I think there may have been some cracks. There may have been some things going on, maybe beneath the surface. And maybe he was a catalyst in bringing out some things that were really there anyway. And it was such a joy, of course, working with Kevin. He's a remarkable person. By the way, you think of Kevin Smith and you think of this brash comedian who's just so quick and, on top of the world. As is the case with many people who are famous, he's actually in person when he's doesn't have that, on mask on, suddenly there's a camera there and there's a reporter in front of him. He's very introspective and you might almost say even shy. It amazes me sometimes these people we have, whether they're actors or musicians who we think are out there and they're almost, invulnerable and, completely confident. And yet in real life, they're actually real human beings.
That's so nice to hear. I'm a big Kevin Smith fan, especially like being from New Jersey and like having like a big 90s movies thing. But you guys had so many amazing guest stars, so I'm sure you got to meet some really interesting people.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I'd place Kevin right on top of the list, though.
Like the nicest, coolest guy to work with. And you mentioned in your book how he was originally supposed to direct Degrassi Goes to Hollywood, and how he still kept trying to help, even though his schedule became less and less available and able to do so. And of course, he ended up, I think, all we saw him was on a computer, Skyping in to I think it was probably only like 3 scenes. He was still very, very funny in those 3 very short scenes.
Him and Jay. I think we only have a few more questions because we don't want to take up too much of your time. But my big one, for me anyway, I noticed like you definitely maintained some relationships with some people, like the actor who played Rick. And, there were some people like Shanae Grimes who left maybe like before their graduation date would have been. Was there any actor who like really affected you by deciding to leave the show? Maybe you felt like their storyline was unfinished, or you were just like especially sad to see them leave?
Well, I had to say, when you work with people, now I wasn't on set every day, but I was there at the read-throughs, I was there, we negotiate contracts, I would drop by set and say hi. And, over a period of 4 or 5 years, you get to know people at a very formative time of their lives. And so when we would do a graduation episode, the writers always managed to do it of course, it would come near the end of the series, and they would make it, usually the final episode of the series. And our production people would have us shooting the scene with everybody